So, formally welcome everybody to this edition of Coffee with Callbi, a unique and first time for us. We have a guest panelist, Jonathan Lewarne, all the way from Mobalyz, and we're going to introduce yourself just now. And around the room, Henriette Potgieter and Nosihle Mbatha, customer success specialists. Missing today, missing in action, is Corey Springer, who's sitting down in Bredasdorp, where the storm has taken out all of the electricity, all of the cell phone towers. So he's not going to be joining us today. Maidi, I see you got your hand up. Do you want to come in and...
I think
Quickly put
it was a thumbs up instead of a hands up, must have been.
Okay. Alrighty, so let's kick off this morning. Got a fantastic turnout. We have 75 attendees today, which I think is a record. And so today, as we normally do, is we open for questions, we open for opinions, we open for insights. But let's first start off with our guest. Jonathan, why don't you give us your 1 minute overview of how you got to be in the contact center industry and where you are now and the type of work that you do with the contact center and specifically your use of Callbi. So off you go.
Thanks, Rod, and good morning to everybody. And thanks to the Callbi team for giving me this opportunity. I'm quite excited to be able to participate today. I've joined a few of these sessions and they look like they're really, really good. So happy to take some questions and hopefully we can answer all of them. Just quickly about me, I head up the customer service center, the company called Mobalyz. We do financing on minibus taxis. We insure the minibus taxis. We've, extended that a little bit to e-hailing and personal lines vehicles. And I look after the part in the financing business. I stepped into the taxi environment a few years ago. Very, very interesting. And if you think you know a lot about the business, I certainly realized I don't. So it's been very, very informative in that way. I've been in contact centers, I realized this morning, for more than half of my life. And I'm not going to give away my age, but I started off as a contact center agent in the sales environment, answering calls and saying, "Hi, you're speaking to Jonathan. How can I help you?" And so, I moved up through the ranks over time, but have always been involved in contact centers in one form or another, specifically in the insurance space. So I'm thrilled to be able to share some of those experiences with you today. Rod, thanks a lot for mentioning that important part. What are we using Callbi for? In short, we've used Callbi to transform our call center business and how we interact with clients. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But just a parting shot, because I know I've only got a minute to do this, is Callbi has become a fundamental part of how we operate. And if anybody's thinking about utilizing the solution, I would strongly recommend it. I mean, for us, it's become a must-have and no longer a nice-to-have. And we can talk a little bit about that as we go along. But thanks for the opportunity again. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to the session.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that, Jonathan. And in fact, everybody on the call, Jonathan and I did an interview last week for a case study that we're about to publish around how the Mobalyz operation uses Callbi. It was a fascinating discussion, and that case study will be published and on the Callbi website in a few days' time. Henriette, I'm going to call you in at this time. You've had a busy couple of weeks or a month since we had our last Coffee with Callbi. Why don't you just give us a quick heads up of how you're finding the operating environment out there in the contact center world, engaging with your clients and with Callbi users. And I'm going to ask you to put your 30 plus years of consulting hat on this morning. And no doubt you're starting to see the kind of things and hearing the questions about the impact of AI on call centers and contact centers. So why don't you just share any of the highlights you've picked up over the last month or so since we last had a Coffee with Callbi community meeting. Back to you.
Thanks. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Wow, I'm in awe with the number of attendees we've got, firstly. So thank you all for your time. We do appreciate it. Sure, Rod, I think if I have to think back over the last probably month, 2 months, is something that is quite noticeable for me and quite remarkable is we are no longer having discussions around why you need to have speech analytics or why you need to incorporate AI. There's no longer that discussion to say, but why do I need to use it? It's now more the shift. It's moving towards saying, what is the best way to utilize it? What is the best way to get the most meaning and the most value out of it? So that is for me, most definitely, there's a bit of a buzz happening in the industry where everybody's going AI. And I know we said it in our last and the previous session where, okay, we must use AI, but it's the industry is maturing a bit more in terms of starting to understand what is AI. AI is an extremely wide concept. What is usable for us in terms of AI? What is the right tools and what is the right suppliers? And together with AI, AI is not the magic wand. It's not the wave it and it's going to fix my business and now we all sit back and it runs itself. It's that realization to start realizing and planning around it, that if I'm going to implement AI, I can't just hand it over to someone and let it roll. There needs to be processes set in place. There needs to be ways in how you operationalize, how you continuously check back together with the change management. So that's for me most definitely where our discussions are happening now. We are also seeing a lot, and that's good news for us, a lot of new clients onboarding. So it's that we want to become part of it. We want to start using it. But now it's that shift to saying it's not going to fix it in one go. You're not going to click a button and there you go. It's now the hard work starts in terms of how do we make sure that this is ultimately meaningful in our business?
Excellent. Good. Great feedback. Thanks for that. Nosi, in the last month or so, what's maybe the highlight or one of the most prevalent questions that you're being asked by Callbi users or just contact centers in general?
Well, Ron, the highlight for my month was I was on leave, so I was just sleeping for a week.
There you go.
Um,
You well deserved rest, Nosi.
yeah, besides that, and I think I'm just going to echo Henriette's sentiments. You know, before, I think for a long time, we've always been chatting about the impact of, introducing this type of a system into an environment where there's manual QAs and people are uncomfortable about, their job security and so forth. I don't think we have that anymore. People understand why we need tools like Callbi. So it's no longer, oh no, this is going to take my job away. It's about, okay, so how can this help me? And then when it comes to the AI stuff, it's not just, you're not going to just upload calls and then this thing is just going to run and give you all the fancy work. And there still needs to be some understanding and some work that comes from an individual to make sure that you've built it or you've structured it in a way that's going to give you sufficient insights that you can use for your business. So I think, and it's going to be a journey, and everybody just needs to understand, yes, AI is a game changer, but it's not a click of a button, give me everything. It's just you need to understand what is it that you want to gain out of it, and how do you prompt it accordingly? What insights do you want to gain? And are those insights valuable? And also understand that it's not going to be 100% accurate. It's just an education and, and getting to use it and understanding what it can give you.
Excellent.
And
Just
when it
before I
comes,
come to you, Jonathan, I'll come to you in a
sorry.
second. Nosti, I think that you reinforce something which our missing in action colleague, Corey Springett, often says, that speech analytics is not something you buy, it's something you do. And I think that reinforces it. Jonathan, I know when we discussed it in the recording to do the case study 10 days ago or so, we talked about the impact that introducing Callbi has on call center agents, from the initial fear of Big Brother is watching to, you mentioned how it's transitioned into where agents are now seeing it as a beneficial add-on to career improvement or career pathing. Would you just speak to that briefly, please?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the approach that many businesses, certainly ours, what we took initially was we wanted to make sure that our agents understood that Big Brother's listening, Big Brother's.
You've frozen there for a sec. Are you still there? Jonathan? No. Okay, while we're waiting for Jonathan to come back in again and log in, Nosy, won't you just pick up on that theme of how agents move from being terrified
and
of
when you
the
position it like
technology?
that, like a lot of the semantics within it. I'm
Jonathan,
back.
sorry, we're back. Okay, can you pick up from the start of that?
No problem.
We lost you there.
Yeah, okay. So apologies for that, guys.
Missing in action.
Yeah, we're good at insuring buses and fixing them. Sometimes we're not so good at our internet connection, but that's a conversation for another day. Rod, so just to get back to the question, and I think where we started was we wanted to get the benefit of analyzing the calls. And having spent 20 years in the industry, there's always been a gap for me. It's you can go and analyze lots of data, but it's almost reactive. Something happened, you go check the data, then you make decisions. This is the opportunity to really gain insights into that piece that you can't pick up via quote sales and all those things. So that was the ask. But where we started was also we wanted to try and change behavior, specifically in the sales environment. I mean, for anybody who works with sales agents, you'll know if you want to check how secure your system is, you leave it to them for a few days and then you'll know. So because we're in the financial services space and it's so highly regulated, we wanted agents to understand that we are checking all the calls, and that we expect them to change the behavior off the back of that. But that didn't necessarily work. It just created a little bit more of, I suppose, animosity between the sales agents and the QA process, especially when it has an impact on their salaries, which you have to have that in place. Otherwise, sales guys will run away and make sales at the expense of everything else. And I mean, no disrespect to salespeople. I was in sales for most of my life.
Very creative people.
I just
We love
understand them well.
salespeople.
We need them. We absolutely need them. But what we then learned over time, especially now that we can gain insight into what our customers are talking to us about, what we're speaking to them about, it's become a collaborative tool where we can now use it to educate our staff. And I think that's really where the magic sauce starts to come into play. Because the moment you can help them to understand, if you say X, Y, and Z, that may cost you a sale, but if you say A, B, and C, it's going to gain you a sale. That changed the mind shift quite significantly. And because we've now also understood what clients are struggling with, we've been able to make a few process changes so that when our agents answer the phone, you're not dealing with the frustrated client off the bat. We've managed to fix some of these things so that the clients are immediately more receptive based on how we structure the conversation. And then for me, the big thing, and these are simple things that we've picked up, intuitively, that some of these things should operate in a certain way. But it's allowed us to really get an insight into how do you structure your IVR? How do you wrap up calls? How do you make sure that you've addressed all the customers' needs and concerns so that they don't have to phone back a second or third time? So off the back of that, it really has been transformational. It is a journey, so it's not going to fix it on day one, and it's not your silver bullet. We talk about AI and how people think that it's taking over the world. If you want to let it take over your world, it will. But it's a partnership for me in conjunction, with everything else that we do. So we do use AI, but we don't let it run wild, and it's certainly not running any parts of the business. But understand it's a journey. And I think the only limitation on that journey is what you can think of. Your mind is the limitation. But it really has transformed the business.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. And I think you've touched on something here, which I'm going to ask Henriette to expand on. And Jonathan, you were talking about changing processes and from a tactical and both a strategic point of view. And I think that's one of the great advantages and the benefits of using speech analytics. Henriette, in your experience, working with clients now, but even back into your previous life in the BPO space and in the contact center space, how important is speech analytics to process change? And what are the impacts that you're seeing from organizations that are doing as Jonathan's doing, using the analytics to get the insights and then to drill down into, root cause analysis and particularly processes, which it happens to be one of my passions, is process design. Over to you, Henriette.
Right, so speech analytics for me is integral to process change. Firstly, is because you now have sight and access to things you couldn't previously see, you are able to start quantifying where the process is going wrong. Because you can now say, okay, there is an opportunity, or there's certain things going wrong, or I'm flagging calls where certain things are happening that shouldn't. Speech analytics gives you access to be able to root cause and deep dive. So it's not I think it's happening or this is why it's happening. I now have quantifiable evidence that on 20% of my calls, it's because the agent needs to place the customer on hold because they don't have access to a system. So firstly, there's where speech analytics feeds into the process change to make informed, quantified decisions. But then further to that, speech analytics is also requires process change, and it is very dependent on process change to make sure that it gets successfully implemented. And what I mean with that is, and that's a lot of times where I see when we start operationalizing and implementing in a new business, is it's not so much learning to use the tool, but it's now, once I'm using the tool and I'm starting to see results, is getting buy-in in the rest of the business, but also then getting that part of the normal operating process on what do we do now? How do we use it? Where does it go? There's usually a lot of defense from that side because it's not understanding how it works, but also not understanding how do I now incorporate this in my day-to-day job. If I've always done something the way I've done it and it's always worked for me, now all of a sudden there's this big world with all calls and what now, and there needs to be a process change that goes together with it over time. So that's definitely the two parts. It feeds process change, but it needs process change to be successful.
Excellent. I think that reinforces what Jonathan was saying earlier. Nosi, when I first met you, no names, no pactoral, but you were very involved in the QA side and the implementation of Callbi in a sales environment. Hardcore outbound sales, telecommunications, mobile stuff, right? And I'm quite sure you discovered, but I'm going to ask you to expand on it, how the insights gained from speech analytics changed scripting in particular, and how that scripting has an impact on sales. Because the topic I want to raise just now, just so the panelists can start thinking about it, is the magic acronym ROI, return on investment. The investments that we make in the software, in the training, in the deployment of speech analytics versus the quantifiable returns that we can see on it. So, Nosi, just briefly, won't you give us just your perspective from your observations in your days driving QA in the sales environment?
So when we initially adopted Callbi, our that time, the main challenge was, because we were a sales environment, we wanted to make sure that the sales that we're making are eventually activating. So the activations were being affected. So what we needed to see is, why are these sales not activating? So with that, we understood, shame, like we said, God bless sales agent, but sales agents can be very creative and they know how to say something that sounds like something, but it's not really. And I think you'd know what I mean. So, and that's where the scripting changes came into play, because now we want to monitor using Callbi if something is said correctly. So we said, okay, so let's change our scripting to make agents say A, B, C, D, and E. So we'll make sure if we say the statement like this, we know that it's eventually going to activate. And yes, the activations did increase. However, what we saw is, because now we are giving agents a standardized statement to say, the sales numbers started tanking because now they're not free to do whatever they wanted to do. So it was a bit of, and then like I always say, it's a journey. It's always going to be this is what I want to achieve. So yes, the activation percentages increase, but the sales numbers have decreased. So now let me attack that. How do we then use Callbi to then increase the sale numbers? What do you need to mention in that call to make sure that client takes up the sale, that client listens to you, and so forth? So yes, the scripting can be changed to achieve a goal that you want to, but you can also use Callbi to achieve the second goal, which is increasing the sale numbers, increasing revenue.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad you said that. Thanks. Just out of interest, my colleague, our colleague Corey and I the other day put together the first of a series of 10-minute podcasts. We call it Show Me the Money. And if anybody's interested in that, it went live a couple of days ago. I put it in the chat so you can listen to our first episode of Show Me the Money. But we'll come back to more about ROI in a second, because we have a very interesting question come up in the Q&A here from Koketso. Koketso, that's a really fascinating question. For those on the call, Koketso asks, would you say Callbi is designed to assist more for sales purposes, or would it compete fairly in debt collection, particularly regarding papier when working with banks, detecting tone, matching information against internal systems, etc.? So that's a fascinating question, and I'm going to pass it to Henriette, but very definitely when we look at over 200 and roughly 220 Callbi users in South Africa now, we have customer service, we have mobile phone environment, we have sales, a large number of debt collection businesses and other financial services companies. But Henriette, why don't you pick up on that and just give perhaps some brief examples? And then Tembeka, I'll come back to you in a second.
Perfect. Thanks, Rod. I had a feeling you're going to pass that one to me. So thanks for that, Koketso. Good question. And I know, yes, we've been talking about sales, but 100%, and Rod has said it, some of our most successful implementations, and you can actually go have a look at all the case studies as well, is also in debt collection. It definitely lends itself to the process. When we look at PAPIA, the definite clauses, if you think about debit order mandate, it's very good to check for that. I am going to touch on your one thing is that you asked in terms of checking or matching information. Callbi can't do that. So remember I said it's not a magic wand that's going to fix everything. But you can check whether the right questions were asked. Did they verify? Did they ask everything they were supposed to? Did they read the mandate? In terms of collections effectiveness, did they push for a debit order? If they pushed for a debit order, did they align it with a salary date? Outside of that, and Jonathan actually mentioned it, it's not just about when I am on the call. It's also if you have your wrap-up codes or your disposition codes, you can use the information in Callbi to understand, is it a real PTP? Was it an actual voicemail? If I have a PTP, was there a discussion on that call that the customer said, I'm not going to pay? Because once again, that is downstream decisions where I'm not expecting money coming in on the book because it's a PTP according to my wrap-up, where actually I'm already knowing it was either a voicemail, it was a call that was only 10 seconds long, or it is already a PTP where the client said, I don't think I'm going to pay. So that is where most definitely you can 100%, and I've seen it practically myself, where we've had clients who converted their PTP to RPC rate, increased it by 15, 20, 25% by means of all those things that you do. So I hope that answers the question. In short, 100%, it is definitely proven to be suitable for debt collection as well.
Excellent. And I think, as Henriette said, we have at least 6 or 7 case studies around collections on the Callbi website, or feel free to email us and we'll send them directly to you. Okay, Tembeka, you have raised your hand. I'm going to allow you to talk. Won't you come in and ask your question, please? Tembeka, are you there? You are muted, bottom left-hand side, unmute. Or you can press the space bar to unmute.
Raised in error, Rod. Usually it's
Right.
a thumbs up. I also
Okay.
usually wait when I see then it was the hand
Uh,
instead of the thumb. So thanks for the
um,
thumbs up, Tembeka.
okay, great stuff. Okay, everybody, so please use the Q&A and or the chat line if you'd like to. And if you'd like to come in live, just put your hand up and we will let you in. Nosi, first Nosi, and then Jonathan, and I'll pass the same question to you, which is in the aspect of compliance monitoring using speech analytics. Whether it is in all the financial services sector where compliance is a major issue, in sales environment where compliance is a makes or break a sale. So, Nosi, why don't you just talk us through very briefly your experience in using speech analytics to monitor and improve compliance within the contact center environment? Over to you.
I think especially in the financial services sectors, I think that's the most easiest ones to monitor on Callbi because those statements are mandatory most of the time. So unlike in a sales environment where you're looking to see if something was mentioned, but it can be fluid, it can be mentioned in different ways. In the financial services, it's either you said a statement or you didn't. So it's very easy. And also those compliance statements are much easier to build, especially with how we've structured the script part when building queries in Callbi. So yes, compliance, very easy to build, very easy to monitor. When it comes to sales, like I mentioned, it can be a little bit fluid because something can be mentioned in 100 different ways, but very easy to monitor on both sectors.
And okay, over to you, Jonathan. You're using Callbi in that space as well to not only monitor process, but the very, very important compliance component in your operating environment. Why don't you talk us through how you're using the technology?
Sure. As a point of departure, I just want to mention that I'm one of the key individuals, one of two on our FSP license. So compliance keeps me up at night. Orange is not my color. So I don't want to find myself in an orange suit being dragged off to jail at some point in time. So jokes aside, look, I agree with what Nosi's saying. We've used it to try and identify where there are gaps. I mean, you're right. There's some things that you just have to say. You don't have a choice around them. But I think understanding where some of those gaps are, you can use your technology to fill the gaps. Now, there are telematics companies out there, and I'm not going to diss them because I don't think that that's fair, but they have a machine that then gives you all the scripting. And I think that's probably taken a little bit too far because half of people tap out probably after 10 seconds. Well, certainly myself. But where we've found some benefit is, and Nozi, you mentioned it a few times, is that fluidity. Is we've allowed ourselves to actually reduce the amount of very technical jargon from a compliance point of view. And we've created a little bit more of a natural conversation with our customers in the sales space. We've actually also utilized the tool to help us reduce very lengthy scripting because we're trying to tick every single compliance box. And now that we understand some of the conversations and where some of the fall-offs almost happen, we've really gone and revised those scripts from 11 pages down to 5. It's helped us to build a QA process which is 100% aligned with that script. So as a sales agent, you can't be surprised or wonder why somebody marked you down. It's aligned with what you're talking to the client about. And then it's given us a really cool opportunity to create a frequently asked questions documents for the salespeople to say, listen, this is what you get marked down on. If you say this is going to improve your score. And it's small things like that that really also help, I think, strengthen the trust in the tool, because it's like I said earlier, it's no longer there to beat you with the stick. It's there to help you and guide you and almost incentivize you from a bit of a carrot point of view, because if you get those things right, it improves the level of commission that you get without risking too much from a regulatory point of view. The one thing that I wanted to mention, and I think this is an important part, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder a little bit, Rod, and you may ask it later on, is in our business, 97% of the calls are done in vernac. Okay, and we look after a large range of clients throughout the country. And for those of you that deal with the vernacular, it's quite interesting because you go from English into vernac, then back again, you'll mix the two. And for me, one of the frustrating parts about being with the business for almost 4 years is that I could never listen to a call to try and understand where there are gaps, where there's opportunities, what are the red flags. And with Callbi, we've now been able to do that. So, the one thing that Callbi does very well is it transcribes the conversations verbatim, and then you can plug that into a piece of AI to translate the conversations, and then I can read with what's going on, and you get a lot of context from that transcription, and it's to the point when I've been able to challenge people on whether the processes have been followed correctly, or not. Where previously, I had to go on somebody's word. So from that perspective, it's given me massive insight into the business. Again, just as an interesting part is we have a professor in the US that's doing his PhD in research, and he spent a lot of time studying the taxi industry in South Africa because it's very unique. And he's really been trying to identify what are the levers that we can pull to try and help the industry because it is under immense pressure at this point in time. So we have two people who phone customers, they ask them a bunch of questions. And then because Chris sits in the US, obviously he's even more removed from the vernac than what I am. But we are then able to transcribe these calls, translate them, and then give him 100% accurate information on what customers are saying. And that has also been massively insightful. It informs, opportunities and levers that we can pull to try and help the industry. So really, I said it before, this piece of software is not a nice to have. If you don't have it and you're not utilizing it, I really think you're missing out on a big opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. Henriette, I think this is an opportune moment to maybe talk about some of the new Callbi features using AI, like call summaries, which are an amazingly powerful tool. Won't you just expand on that for anybody on the call who hasn't been exposed to that particular Callbi feature?
Right, I'll do so. And I think it actually ties in with Koketso's question, where he's asked, please give a clear distinction between a speech analytics tool versus an AI tool, and where would Callbi fall under?
Yeah.
In essence, in the broader term of the word, speech analytics is also a form of AI, right? Because it's machine learning, it's language models that's been trained, but it is listening, and that's where speech analytics, where the core of Callbi is from, is the fact that we take audio recording, voice, a call, and transcribes it into a written format. That's then is speech to text, where the tool text queries and other things then allows you to interrogate and look for words, etc. So that's the speech analytics side of it. Koketso, then to answer you and anyone else, we've also started incorporating AI in the sense I think that most of us are used to. The Chat GPT or the Claude or the Meta is what we call that is your LLM or your large language model that is able to provide answers based on context of understanding words and conversation. So we do, and the tools that you are referring to, or the additional features, we do now have a call summary where on any call you can generate a summary which is not based on the text word search, am I finding a word in a call, but it's based on the context of what was said in a conversation, based on AI, LLM, where that AI model will then give you a summary of the call. It would provide you with what was the call driver of the call, the sentiment of the call, the outcome, was it resolved or not. We've also now implemented, and we're busy working and in beta testing with that you will be able to run AI queries. So we've spoken about text queries. A text query literally is I am looking through a document and I'm looking for a word. If you click Control F on your keyboard, when you look for a word on your page, that's a text query. An AI query is in the broader context where, if you think about anyone who's utilized, even on WhatsApp, the meta part, when you ask a question and it gives you an answer, is this works the same. It is an AI-driven model where you can ask an open question or a specific question, that's based on context that will provide you with an answer. So, Koketsu, to answer your specific question, Callbi is in essence a speech analytics tool. It starts with speech, but we also do WhatsApp, we also do chat. So it starts with the transcript piece of it, having in written format context of interactions that happened. Bolted onto that, we have included and will continuously expand with adding AI, the next tier of AI, to make things easier and better.
Excellent. That's a very clear definition, I think. Jonathan mentioned high proportion of calls into your contact center and vernacular. Nosti, why don't you just talk about how Callbi's call summaries work with vernacular but present the summaries in English? Why don't you expand on that for us, please? Muted.
You're on mute.
My bad, sorry. So unlike when you're building queries for, I think everyone that's here is using Callbi currently. Unlike when you are building queries where you have to add specific words in a different language to find it in a transcript. Summaries work differently because it's language model, so large language model. It'll understand the language that it's spoken and it'll look at the context using that language, but also present it to you in English, which is standard for all our summaries. So it's not going to listen to Xhosa and present it in Xhosa, but it's going to present it in that universal language that everybody will understand. Unlike how we do it when we do it the text queries.
In the text, okay. Very interesting, yeah.
Rod,
I'm going to...
I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack quickly because I have a question that I get asked a lot, but I think if Nosi can also give her input for the fact that, I mean, you are isiZulu speaking, so you native speaking, you understand the language.
Understanding when all the ones right now.
Yeah, there you go. So a lot of times I get the question, and especially from vernacular speaking users, is when they start the journey is where they say, but your transcript is not translated. So it's now in Zulu or it's now in Sotho. How do I build my query? Because the question I get asked a lot is if in isiZulu specifically or isiXhosa is there's a lot of ways to say the same thing. And especially when we start talking about dialects, or if I do a straight translation from English, the words I'm going to use, that is not what's going to be in my transcript, because call recorded in straight up translated English into isiZulu is nowhere near the informal way of conversing. 100%. So the question I get asked, and I was asked it yesterday, and I mean, I'm answering it, but I think coming from you, it would also hold a lot of value, is how does that work? How do you overcome that? And how do you build your queries, and does it even work? Or is it just that it's just not suitable and you can't build for the way that people speak the language?
So I always say when we're getting new clients that it's always advisable to have somebody that speaks that language or to speak different languages, because an English person, no matter how much you try and no matter how many AI tools you use, it's difficult to get that better down to the T. Especially in Zulu, and I think in Xhosa as well, one word can mean different things depending on the context that it's used. So if you take that sentence and you plug in a Google Translate, for instance, you're going to get gibberish, because in a natural language where it's spoken, it may not mean the same thing. So taking calls are recorded. The recorded part would be what's standard on all of the statements. But the words that are coming before that can change into 1,000 different words. They can say Zia record or Aya record or A record diwe, but the only thing that's standard is the record part of it. So you will need somebody that understands the language. I don't understand Sotho and Setswana, but what I do, then I will use the AI tools to try and give me, an understanding of what could be fun. And sometimes it works, but I know that it's not 100%, which is why when I'm building queries, I'll always go back to my clients and say, can you just check if I've mentioned it correctly so that they can improve that. But yes, you won't get it 100% accurate. And please understand that if you're trying to translate. And I think that's why we don't even have a translator on call, because if you want to translate word for word in that conversation, I don't know what you'll get out of it, because in the natural way of speaking, it may not mean the same thing.
Sorry, if you don't
Okay,
mind,
that makes sense.
if I
Come
can
in,
just
Jonathan.
jump in there. So I
Please.
think one of the skepticisms we had in the business is, how accurate is this thing? Right? Especially based on what Nosi is saying now. It's like, how much can we trust it? And since we've started doing the call summaries, we've really engaged with many different environments. One of them being claims, where there was an outcome on a claim, and the claims guys are always interesting because they want to test you, and they always do it in quite an interesting manner. So they gave us 50 calls to go and listen to, and then we gave them the feedback on what we had found in the calls, and probably 80% of it was spot on. And the claims guys were really impressed with that, because they're one of the environments that have been given some input and recommendations around process changes they can make. And they've implemented those almost immediately. And they've seen an improvement in the customer experience, because instead of waiting for a customer to phone you back to ask you about where's the vehicle in the panel shop, as an example, it's now informed a process where either via an SMS or an outbound call or an email, and this is again a simple example, just to let the customer know where in the process they are, it really has improved not only the amount of calls that we take and the amount of repeat callers that we get, but it's improved that customer experience quite significantly. And you can think about it in your own personal lives. If your insurance company, and some of them do it well, others not that well, but if they keep you informed from point A to point Z about what's happening in that claims journey, it really just sets your mind at ease, because you know where they are, if you need to make a call, you know where to pick up the conversation in terms of where your vehicle is in that process. And that's just one example of where we've utilized it. We've also utilized it in the investigations department. So if 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2, we have somebody take a look at those claims. And then also after the fact, we've come back and analyzed those. And again, with a great degree of accuracy. And Nosi, you're right. It's not 100%, but I think if you get it 80% there, it's 80% more than what you had before you started using the tool. And you really can make some informed decisions, which you can back up if anybody challenges it based on the information that has been received.
Excellent. Thank
So,
you for that.
sorry, I'm jumping in again.
No,
Based on
please
what
do.
Jonathan said, I just want to
Yeah.
tag on to that. And what I always say is, if we think back to QA and sampling and before having access to speech analytics, on average, what we've seen is probably 0.5 to 1% of calls that gets listened to. And that, in traditional ways, became the platform or the basis on which business decisions were made. So what I say is, would you rather have 100% of 1% being accurate, or would you rather go with 80% of 100% being accurate? And that's the mind shift. It's yes, okay, you are going to get not 100% because you're just not going to get it, but it's still in masses, volumes more than what you had before.
Okay, excellent. Nice feedback there. Okay, Sheedan's got an interesting question in the chat, and basically saying, is there a way to automatically flag any negative sentiment calls in real time? And I think there's a real feature that we need to look at here. Callbi is not a real-time analytics tool. And as such, it is inexpensive and cost effective. Real-time speech analytics demands massive capital investment, on-site technologies, racks of servers, huge amounts of bandwidth, and consequently, the cost per agent to do real-time analytics is astronomical. We would gladly set up a one-on-one chat and expand on that. So the problem is real time versus near time. And I'm going to ask Nosi just to talk about near time sentiment analysis. And if you can just make that distinction.
Yeah, so I think this one would need a business to sort of adjust their upload time because we want to get it to as near time as possible. So we've got clients that are uploading every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes or whatever. So if you can get the upload time to be shorter, so as soon as the calls are uploaded, they come through to Callbi and then it runs through, you can then be able to run those sentiment queries or look in those calls to understand which ones were negative or positive sentiments. But it will need the upload gap, what do you call it? The upload time to be shorter, to be as shorter as possible after the call has been concluded.
Okay. Henriette, why don't you just pick up on that? What are the technical limitations, if any, on what dictates the periods between recording and upload? Is it bandwidth? What are the...
That is, so from a Callbi perspective, there isn't a limitation. And we recommend, I mean, we usually say an hour. We do have clients, Jonathan, I know you're uploading very regularly. We have got clients who upload every 15 minutes. We've got clients who does it once a day. So from a Callbi perspective, no limitations. It sits more on the organization side from where you are uploading. The limitations is how easy is it to access the recording, because you need to have the recording. Does it sit on your end or not? It's also the generation of the metadata file. There is a file that you upload with that recording that provides more information, which is the agent name, the timestamp, the disposition code, and anything else that you can pull from there. So that's usually where it sits, is sometimes there's some limitations. How do you access, how not? Also, I think more if you have the skill internal to write the script and automate, because all of it can be automated. It's just a matter of how accessible is it, how often can you get it, or are there some limitations on that end?
So, Rod, if
go for it, John.
Yeah, I'm going to put my hand up next time so I don't interrupt you. So apologies for that. But
No
I think
worries.
just to latch on to that question, and I think it's a good question, and I think a lot of the feedback that's been provided is spot on. So, Shayden, what I would recommend you do is have a conversation with your CRM provider, because that's really where you can make a difference in terms of how regularly you put calls through to Callbi to transcribe it. I'm not going to mention the CRM name, and I'm not going to be a salesperson for them, but they have created a widget that allows us to, depending on how quickly or how regularly you run the cron, to be able to push calls through to Callbi to get those transcriptions. And then you can create some automation from there that tells you, listen, I think you need to go check out this call because A, B, and C was said, or the customer sentiment is really, really poor. But I think what's important here is real time. Real time means different things to different people. And I don't think that you're going to get it as and when the person is speaking to the customer. But depending on how you set up that CRM, you can really get access to the calls within 5 minutes and then flag the ones that you need to intervene on, or phone the client back to say, we understand that something went wrong. I'm the supervisor. How can I assist you? And I think, again, from a customer experience point of view, that really puts your business in a very different space if you're truly, truly serious about customer centricity.
Excellent. Jonathan, in your environment, what is the frequency of your uploads and the lag between your supervisors getting the flag about negative sentiment calls, for example?
So we run the cron every 15 minutes. And then use that to try and help us flag where there's an issue. So, and that obviously always depends on capacity and those sorts of things. But worst case scenario, we're probably looking at about a half an hour turnaround before we have some insight into that conversation, and then can initiate a relevant discussion with the customer. We do the CSAT on our IVR. And we also create flags there to say if the score is less than 3, then give the customer a call. But before you can do that, you've got to go listen to the conversation, or you've got to pull the transcript. And often when you speak to the customers, they're like, but I was actually so happy with the service, I just pushed the wrong button. So it's a bit of a hit and miss in that regard. So when you've got the transcript with the sentiment built into it, that's really where you can phone the client and really have the correct conversation off the bat.
Excellent. That's great feedback. So I think that puts, the real time versus near time into practical perspective, because the cost differentiation is massive between. And so, that 15 minutes or 20 minutes to respond to a call, in my experience, is more than adequate in terms of driving customer experience. We got time for one more question, I see, Coquette. So I think we're going to give you a prize for the most contributions to our session today. I wish we had prizes, but Henriette, won't you pick up on Koketsu's request for information about the reporting side of Callbi, and also, as we'd like to share, is some of the new developments happening in the reporting, such as the call insights. Henriette?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Rod. Koketsu, so everything that you build, the outcomes that you see from that in the Callbi user interface itself. Firstly, you've got a dashboard section where you can visualize, set up your reports. So if you think about all of your metadata, you have query outcomes, everything. You have access to build either scorecards, and I know you've mentioned outside of agent compliance, but you can draw up lists. You can flag calls where a certain thing is happening. So it's more about surfacing that. So the user interface has a space where you do that as part of your dashboards. Outside of that, we have a report section where you can automatically extract in an Excel format, again, any of that information. So scorecards, call lists, and that gets auto-generated on a set interval. All you need to do is you need access to Callbi for information security, obviously, but you will receive a link, you can go in, you can download. So that enables it much easier to get your data out already in a format that you can use. We also have everything you see in the user interface is available via API. So if you do have on your end any interest in maybe using a Power BI or any tool where you use the data and you can access it from various endpoints, so whether it's scorecard data, whether it's just plain query, it's call data, any of that. So either you can extract in raw data form and you can then manipulate and do what you want to for your own formats of reporting, or already we are providing for you in the dashboard itself or in the report section where you can then extract. We are, Nairad, I think what you're alluding to is from a call insights perspective, and coming back to the AI portion of things, is we are at the moment looking and really testing and seeing how we can also utilize AI and the power of AI to provide you insights. So I know, and someone once said to me, okay, but all of this is just information, it's not insights. So yes, insights is about interpreting the information, and that is what we're currently looking at, is what story can it tell? So that's definitely an exciting development that we are playing around with, to say, okay, so what story does this tell me? Currently it already tells the story, but we want to see how AI can just make it better.
Wonderful. I think it's time. Thanks so much for that, Henriette. I think it's time to start wrapping up. And I think I'm going to ask Jonathan if you could to share with us also about 30 seconds or so, your high-level insights that you want to share with the guests that we have logged in on the session today.
Maybe just a practical point or two, Rod, because one of the questions that we were asked internally is, how much information do you need to feed the machine before you can get a reliable outcome? So for the statisticians on the conversation, or on the call, please forgive me, I'm not one myself. As I said, I've come out of sales my whole life. But what we did is we ran 100 calls through the call summary, and we were given a certain amount of feedback, insights, recommendations, etc. I then upped the 100 to 500 in the same environment and got pretty much the same outcome. Okay, so if you're thinking about where you need to focus your attention, take about 100 calls. I think it can really give you some good insights. Funny discussion that I had with a friend of mine who works for quite a large insurer. The conversation 2 weeks ago went around the fact that everybody in the insurance industry is making lots of money because there's been no natural catastrophes for at least the last 2 years. and a week later we are where we are. So I think he's probably silently swearing at me somewhere. But he heads up the data division. He has a PhD also in data, and his business is using Callbi at the moment. But he's heard about it in the background, but hasn't necessarily utilized the data that it's providing. So when we had the conversation, it was really something that got him quite excited. And I have no doubt that within the last week or so, he started getting his fingers into that, and really another piece of information that he hasn't been able to see before. So really, again, your limitation is what you can think of. And if you embrace this, it does take a little bit of time just to get used to it, like everything else. But take the time; it's worth the investment, and it really can transform your business.
Fabulous. And Jonathan, I think thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, and also the fantastic case study that will be published in the next few days, and for your time today and for your contributions. Round the room, Nosi, sitting down in KZN, your insights for wrapping up today.
Nothing much from my side. It was a very good session with lots of attendees. So thank you very much. Even the people that have fallen off, wherever you are, thank you so much. It's nice to see the people that are coming through every month. We appreciate you. And like I always say, please reach out to me and Henriette. We are always available in case you need anything. And we really look forward to that feedback, because we try and do as much as we can to support you guys. But if there's any additional features that you may need, please reach out to us, or even to give us feedback on the new features that we've released. So please. Thank you so much, guys.
Excellent. Thank you. I see, Henriette, you responding to that question there. But folks, thanks for the clapping hands. Thanks for the hearts. Our CEO, by the way, he measures the success of our Coffee with Callbi by the number of hearts. So guys, let's have some more hearts, please.
Rod, sorry, I'm quickly just going to answer the question live. I think it's easier than typing. So Zimkita was just asking, when you upload calls, does the system look for a specific call duration, or does it upload any call as long as there's a recording, including no answer, voicemail, etc.? So we recommend that you upload every single call that you have a recording for, because that's, once again, not just based on conversation, but other analysis that you can do. It's all your data, all your calls. So yeah, I'm going to do a wrap up, because Rod, I think you forgot about me, but everyone, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the session. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, as always, really fruitful.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate the time.
Guys, and we'll see you on next month's Coffee with Callbi, which will be on the 2nd of June, Tuesday, 2nd of June, 9 o'clock. There will be a recording of this session today. I'll do some very fun and basic edits, and we'll upload it. It'll be on YouTube later this afternoon and on the website. So feel free to share it internally with your colleagues, friends, and non-Callbi users. Let's expand the community. And thank you, everybody. This was an absolute record of having nearly 80 people logged in, and everybody on the call is part of a community, the Callbi community. So thank you very much. With that, from Johannesburg, over and out.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.